Hello, beautiful women. Welcome to She Talks, a space for you to come home to your inner wisdom, which I call your she. I'm Sara Avant Stover, a yoga and meditation teacher, best-selling author, and founder of The Way of the Happy Woman. And I'm really honored to welcome you to a new season on our podcast called The Heartbreak Diaries. Now, heartbreak is a harsh but incredibly powerful spiritual teacher. It pulls the rug out from underneath us and asks us to find our footing amidst the free fall. It shatters us and demands we piece ourselves back together, more whole and holy than ever before. As I've weathered a massive series of heartbreaks over the past year and a half, I've realized that one of the most painful pieces of grief is often the isolation it brings. So I'm on a mission to help shift this by creating a safe space where women can share not only the highs of our lives, but more importantly, the lows. To help us find a sense of community in our struggles and to give voice to the losses that we often grieve in silence, I've created this special interview series called The Heartbreak Diaries. Over the next couple weeks, I'll share 4 intimate interviews with women who've weathered intense heartbreak and come out the other side even stronger. From growing older to the sudden death of a beloved, from baby loss to divorce and the loss of a parent, these brave women will open up about some of the toughest chapters of their lives and exactly what they did to be transformed by them on every level. Beyond being a safe space to speak up and share about our losses, this series has another purpose. It honors the opening of a new course that I've been working on for the past year called Healing from Heartbreak, Transformed Through the Wild Wisdom of Grief. This gentle, guided 4-week heroine's journey is the exact course that I wish I'd had during my own heartbreaks. It gathers all the resources, all the tools that I've had to piece together on my own, and I'm offering it to you in one place to help us heal and grow into more human and honest versions of ourselves, with the community support and tools we need to make it through our darkest days. As I've learned to befriend rather than fear my grief over these past couple of years, I've discovered that weathering it well requires a truly compassionate and integrative approach. So we start on June 7th, and there's a special gift for any woman who joins us early before May 30th. And you can learn more at thewayofthehappywoman.com/healing-from-heartbreak. So grab your tissues, get comfy, and enjoy this intimate interview as part of our Heartbreak Diaries. Hello, sisters. It is a strange day here in Boulder. It's mid-May and it's incredibly snowy and windy and dark outside. So I'm just hunkering in with a cup of tea and my dog Sadie sleeping at my feet. And I'm really looking forward to sharing with you our first interview of this series today with Krista Barber, who's a leadership trainer and coach who also lives here in Boulder. And I've known Krista pretty much since I moved to Boulder about 10 years ago. We're part of the same kind of conscious community here. And the story that she's going to tell us today is one that really rippled strongly through our entire community almost 2 years ago. And I'll let Krista tell that story, but it's been really beautiful and powerful to witness from afar how she has navigated this intense passage of a very sudden, unexpected death of her partner, and how she dealt with the shock of that and has continued to move forward and to heal from that process, not only to heal, but to grow stronger from it. So I'll let her share that story with you all. And I also really want to honor Krista because this is the first time that she's spoken publicly about her partner Mark's passing, and just to really create a safe space amongst us all listening for her to share this. And I know it was healing for her to give voice to the journey that she's been on. And I know that there's going to be women out there who have experienced something similar, or who are going to, and are going to find a sense of, meaning and refuge in Krista's story. So I hope that you enjoy it, and I hope it's helpful for you. And please do share it with any woman in your life who could really use Krista's message today. All right, here we go. All
right, welcome, Krista.
Hi, Sarah. Hello.
It's really good to have you here with us.
Thank you. It's really great to be here, and I really appreciate the invitation to talk about my journey with you.
Yes, and I want to honor, I know this is really the first time that you're speaking out publicly about it, and I know that's vulnerable and unknown, and I just really appreciate your bravery in doing that with us today.
Yeah, you're so welcome, and it feels vulnerable and tender, and also exciting at the same time to get to share some parts of my story and my journey, in hopes that it can support other women in their own journeys as well.
Mm-hmm. So to start to dip our toes in to our conversation today, we always start our women's gatherings with a personal sharing. And can you let us know, also just as a way for you to get more comfortable in the space, where you're joining us from today and how you're feeling in your body, heart, and mind?
Absolutely. So I am calling from Boulder, Colorado. It's a lovely kind of gray, beautiful, misty day over here. And I'm feeling in my body pretty alive and a little nervous. My mind feels clear, and I feel quite present and a little bit curious how this conversation is going to go. Yeah.
And because I know that we're here today to talk about a really major loss in your life that you experienced a couple of years ago, and that really our whole community experienced, but you were definitely in the center of that. Can you tell us more about this loss and what happened?
Yeah. So it was just over a year and a half ago. It'll be 2 years in September. And Mark and I had been in relationship for a total of 4 years prior to his passing. And we had quite an interesting journey together. What I'll say is that that from the moment we started being in an intimate relationship together, it was an extraordinary love affair on so many levels. And in the last 9 months of his life, we had quite a bit of challenge with each other. We actually stopped calling ourselves being in relationship 9 months prior to his passing, but yet we both had a very hard time staying away from each other during those 9 months, but also a lot of challenge and conflict of just trying to find each other and trying to get on the same page. And yet again, it was this, our love for each other was made it really hard for us to be apart, despite the challenges. So fortunately, before he passed, fortunately we were in contact, quite a bit of contact, the 3 to 4 weeks prior to his passing, and fortunately we had some of the most extraordinary conversations and intimacy and wildly miraculous insights and unfolding before his death took place. And one night he was dancing with our community, and actually, I'll just back up for a second. Our last phone call we had, I hadn't been sleeping well, and I had talked to him a few hours before he passed away, and we had plans to see each other the next night, and he's gave me this, like, Krista, go to bed early, sleep super well, we'll talk in the morning. And the next morning, I woke up and I had slept incredibly well, surprisingly well, and I picked up my phone and I looked at my phone, and my phone had exploded with all of these kind of cryptic messages, and people had called throughout the night, and it's like, Krista, I'm here for you. And I'm like, what's going on? And I called a girlfriend who had called a few minutes earlier, and she told me what happened, and Mark was dancing, with some members of our community, and the night before, and he walked out into the hallway and wasn't feeling well, and basically fell to his knees and hit the ground, and from what I hear, it seemed that he had passed pretty quickly. So it was a sudden death that none of us, had any idea was coming, essentially. And so finding this news out, of course, the world just stops and becomes really still. And that morning became the start of what I consider the most challenging period of my life, navigating that, but also the most extraordinary gift as a result of having to, pull myself up off of the ground and discover who I really am as a result of Mark's passing.
Mm-hmm. I just want to check in with you to see how you're doing so far after sharing that.
Thanks, Sarah. It's interesting because it's like there are so many things that feel so important to the whole story, and
mm-hmm.
to try to share them all is impossible,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel tender. Definitely feel tender about it. But it also feels so important to speak about it in a more public way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any other pieces of the story? You said that there's so many pieces, and I know, with intimate relationships and with the crisis, there are so many different threads. Are there any others that you wanted to give voice to right now, or do you feel complete with that kind of painting of the picture?
Thank you. I appreciate that. I would say, while, it was really what's profound, one thing there's so many things that are profound about this story, but one thing that's really profound for me is, Mark was in his last 3 months of his life, he was kind of on his own walkabout, and he was discovering and allowing himself to do whatever he wanted to do to discover more of who he was in those 3 months. And during those 3 months, he was telling some of his buddies and some of his friends and colleagues, of saying, I don't have a lot of time here. I need to do work that really makes an impact. I don't have a lot of time left. And about maybe a week or two before he passed away, he was telling me about a vision that he had. And I didn't quite get fully what he was saying, but the vision was essentially, he was saying, Krista, I had this vision of us, and he said, we go forever backward and we go forever forward. And he said, and I'm essentially leaving for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of was like, oh, because we've been in this challenging space, it sounds like he's seeing a vision that we need to take space, and then the more I thought about it, I was like, oh, wait a minute, like what is he talking about? And is he talking about like leaving this planet? And so the last conversation we had, I was going to ask him. I was like, okay, so what is the time frame here, Mark? Like, what are we talking about, this vision that you saw? And because we were going to see each other the next night, I decided to not ask him that question. But then, of course, I never got to ask him that question. So I say all that to say that there was some knowing in him that he was going to pass. I really get that sense. And the kinds of conversations that he had leading up to his death, as I hear more and more from the community, as I reflect and look back at our conversations, there's such a mysterious, miraculous component to Mark's passing and how it all unfolded. So I think that's really what I want to share there as well.
And then, Christy, you spoke to how, understandably, that his passing catapulted you into the most challenging period of your life so far.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through kind of like the different layers of that challenge over the past year and a half?
Yeah. I can, there's, as I was preparing for this call, it's like, I think I wrote like a 50-page essay, like navigating my journey, and there's so, like you say, like layers, there are so many layers. And, I think, from a high level, what I can speak to is, Mark's passing was incredibly devastating for me personally on so many levels. We had a love affair that I've never had before in my life. We also had a lot of fire and friction between us. That was also a loss to lose that. We had incredible partnership in so many ways, and yet it was so hard to find each other, as I mentioned. But so to lose him was devastating in its own. And what it kicked up for me was, bigger existential questions that I had been skating around my whole life, around, holy cow, like, what are we up to here? Why, what is life about? What's the purpose of this? But then to lose someone so quickly and to have the, a perspective of like, whoa, wow, like what kind of God is out there such that suddenly someone is gone like Mark was gone? And what does this mean about life? And what is this that we're doing here? And why am I here? And it really took me into a deep suffering of trying to find meaning. I know Viktor Frankl, who wrote A Man's Search for Meaning, I think he calls it like the existential vacuum, where life becomes incredibly meaningless, and not from the perspective of a spiritual perspective, but from, not from an enlightened perspective, but from a suffering perspective. And I was in it. I was deeply in it, and there was a time when I just didn't know if I wanted to be here, and it was the loss of Mark, and it was this existential misunderstanding or couldn't find meaning that had me really fall to my knees and question like everything, which was a really difficult time.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that in the course that I'm teaching after sharing these interview series, Healing from Heartbreak, is like we're moving through the different stages of healing, like the death phase for ourselves, like what you're talking about, and then like the transformation stage, and then the rebirth.
Right.
And what I've found, I haven't experienced the loss like yours, but I have experienced other forms of losses that have been quite intense. And what I've found in the very beginning, phases of grief, that it's debilitating. Mm-hmm. The shock, and even like eating is hard, and getting out of bed is hard, and like getting through the day is hard.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, how was it for you in those early days and weeks?
It's so interesting because it's like, on one hand, like, what I believe grief can do for us is if we're open and available to it, it can actually, like, give us a portal into an incredible amount of sacred presence. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, this kind of debilitating, can't get out of bed, can't function really, both of those things. And I would say that there was it was like a swing back and forth for me of getting tossed into this portal of like, holy shit, like life and death, impermanence, this is no joke. And in some ways, like, I was so widely cracked open that I could see the beauty in everything and the sacredness in everything. And then there were the times which in the beginning were more like this, which was the kind of debilitating one foot in front of the other. And what I was incredibly grateful for was, Mark's two kids, and I had, the moment that Mark died, my orientation went towards Mark's son, and and supporting his son. And when I look back, it's like, yeah, I supported his son, but really, like, having that view of I'm going to support him, I'm going to support his son no matter what, and I'm going to be here for him no matter what, was actually my own savior, because it had me exist for someone else, to support his son. So that's a little bit of a flavor. But yeah, and I look back too, and I'm like, I still worked. I think I took a couple of weeks off of work, but like looking back, I'm like, I have no idea how I made it through the kind of work that I made it through. Like I was an empty shell walking around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then how has that shifted over the past year and a half?
Well, I would say, kind of getting into this, I really believe for me it was kind of this dark night of the soul, where it was any kind of ego that I had or that held me up as a human being, as a structure, was like, it felt like it was just crashed down. I had nothing to prove. There's nothing to be right or wrong about. It was just existing. And and what I would say is that, looking for answers of why Mark passed, where is he, why does this happen to us, what is this life about, I could never find answers. I know that philosophers throughout our entire, history have been looking for answers, and some people come up with their own answers, but I couldn't find any answers. But what I could find, and this, essentially was my saving grace, through diving into the grief and diving into the heartache in meditation, in sitting in silence and really deeply being with it, something inside of my heart kept me going, and it kind of was like this flame that kept burning and that knew something more than my mind could ever understand. And it's kind of like, I don't even know how to describe it, but the heart to me knows something so much more than my brain can ever comprehend. And so basically, I guess, that people talk about Phoenix rising. Like, at some point I realized that I wasn't going to find answers, but if I wanted to be here on this planet and to survive and to really live here and not just kind of live in a haze or live disembodied, then I would have to generate myself. I would have to rebuild myself. I would have to dive so far deep inside that I could refine myself, rediscover myself, recreate myself. As much as I wanted somebody else to do it for me, nobody else was going to do it. And so that kind of started to become the transformation process for me of pulling myself back up and finding my own meaning to all this, and my own trust in this heart space that knows so much more than I can ever comprehend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things when there's grief, and one of the things that people have told me is like it takes time. Like time takes time, and that it's not permanent, but it does get better. Right. When did you and just for people who are in the thick of intense grief, acute grief right now?
Yeah.
At what point did you start to feel things lifting and just getting easier a little bit? Yeah,
that's a great question. And well, a couple of things I want to say about that is, one is, on some level it helped when people said, time will heal. And on another level it was like I wanted to tell them to, what to do with themselves when they would say something like that. I was like, you have no idea what I'm going through. There was it's an interesting dance with that. And I would say that, at times I was like, oh my God, this is never going to go away. This is so painful. And this is I just don't see the end of it, because I think it's kind of getting better, and then it doesn't, and yeah. But for me, I would say though that, it's been a year and 3/4-ish, but I would say that at the year mark, of Mark's passing, and from having, really intentionally worked with my process and my grief and really tending to it and having the community support from it, or to tend to it, had the year be a really big marker for me, and I didn't realize it was going to be, but something about the year mark for me really started to feel like things began to shift on a bigger level, even though all along they had been shifting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you mentioned community support with your grief. Can you talk more about and you also spoke about your meditation practice, the tools, the people, the practices that helped you just work with the grief? As you said, you were really conscious about your process with it. Yeah.
Yeah. There were so many things that were essential for me, I think, and are continue to be essential for me. I'm definitely, it's still in a process. And I will also say that I believe that I will always be grieving Mark and his passing.
Yeah.
And there's, at some point now, I feel like I have a choice between suffering that he's gone, which is, to me, is very different from grieving that he's gone. And suffering is more of this getting caught into a contracted state that I'm making meaning about it, such that it means something that's not necessarily a forwarding perspective, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But so one of the tools that really supported me to get where I am today and continues to support me is to give myself permission to be exactly where I am in my process. And there's at times feelings of other people thinking that it would be good for me to be in a different space, or I should be in a different space, or I should have a different perspective. And if I started to allow myself to listen to the shoulds, even my own shoulds, I should be different, I should feel different, I should be in a different space, it really was not supportive in my process. But to give myself permission to be exactly where I am was a really helpful tool. So that was really important to me. And then, of course, the people around me, I feel so fortunate. my family, Mark's kids. I am in a women's group. We've been together for 5.5 years. There's currently 5 of us, but each woman, having that net of women and people who can hold us while we're going through this and understand that, I think what's also important to understand is that each woman's going to have her own journey, and what also has been super important is that, giving myself permission also to have it look whatever it needs to look like for myself, which at many times was to be totally internal and to be processing, and other times it was to reach out and to have a community that understands that at different points I'm going to need different things. And I have also a business partner who's incredibly supportive and understanding. So the people that are around me definitely made a huge difference. I would say that ritual for me was and is huge. There was I had a lot of ritual at the very beginning, and I still have ritual every night now that I light a candle every night before I go to bed. And that's been from day one since Mark passed, and it feels like it's an honoring, it's a continuing to bless the process and grieve the process and find myself. So ritual has been a big tool. I would say staying off of social media has been essential for me. Really disconnecting from the noise of the world in that way has been really essential. And then also, and I think I've kind of pointed to this a little bit, but not thinking that I know something, there was times when I could think that it's kind of hard to explain, but I guess think that I know what's happening, or think that I know, sorry to be inarticulate about this. It's like, here's if I'm entering into a meditation, and I've had an experience previous to this meditation saying that, here's where maybe I'll say this way, if I feel I'm suffering and I enter into a meditation, it's like being open enough to feel what's present in the moment versus what I've experienced in the past. That kind of open, surrendered, not knowing was really essential in my process as well. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
What were ritual? Sorry.
Yeah.
Was there more you wanted to say there?
Oh, those are some of the bigger things. And I mean, the other thing I'll say too is, it was really, really hard for me to find any kind of resources surprisingly, of women who had lost, some sort of lover or beloved or husband or spouse suddenly. And it was hard for me to find the resources of who's been through this before. Unfortunately, I did find 2 women who it happened at the exact same age that I was, that they had a similar experience. And that was really supportive to hear women who had gone through something similar. So that was another important resource for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did you find those women?
One woman is a woman that's in our community who is, she's super powerful, potent woman, and I forget how I found out that this had happened to her. Either she reached out to me or somebody connected us, and so to meet with her was like such a gift to hear her story and see where she is today. And then the other woman is a woman named Patricia Albert, which maybe you've heard of her. She's kind of like extended in our community. She works in the integral space quite a bit, and I've known her for years, and she's just been kind of like a second mom in a certain way. And And so I reached out to her because I knew that this had happened to her. But I didn't know that both of these women, and I'm pretty sure, was exactly the same age, which I was 41, which is kind of crazy to hear that.
That is crazy. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And you also mentioned the ritual of lighting the candle.
Yes.
One of the things that we're working with in this course, Healing from Heartbreak, are different kinds of rituals to work with grief. Is there anything more you want to say about that, like any other ritual that you found really helpful?
Yeah. Ritual with women coming together, holding space with me, and we meet every 2 weeks, and we tend to have some sort of ritual. But that was a ritual in terms of intentionally coming together and speaking to the pieces that need to be spoken to. I would say that I have a particular connection with nature, and which most of us do. But as a result of Mark's passing, there was something around the nature and even the moon and the moon cycle and ritual around the new moon and the full moon. Just in terms of noticing where I'm at each phase. And then I would say that mostly the ritual of really listening deeply into what's alive for me, especially when I'm in meditation space, but at any given point of a deep listening of what's actually here, what's actually present, what's actually moving, and really practicing that sort of listening to support my process is a continued huge ritual, which often uncovers more layers of either grief or wisdom or insight around the entire process for me of this deep kind of listening seems to uncover a lot of that.
Right. And then you mentioned some things that weren't helpful, like social media. And I think, something that I've noticed during my times of grieving is that there are people who come closer, and then there are people who are kind of scared away.
Yeah.
And what was your experience with that? What is your experience with that? What did you find helpful from people, and what did you find is very not helpful, or what did you realize around other people's support?
Yeah, that is such a good question, because it is interesting how, people who, and I can completely understand this, and it's such a big learning, it's such a big, beautiful lesson for me as well. I'm going through this, but it's people who I would imagine on some level that would have reached out or would have gotten more curious or would have extended themselves, I think did become, some people, became a little bit afraid of not knowing how to be with me. And yet then there were people who, I didn't know that well, and they would lean in with incredible care and curiosity, and I was just blown away by how they were being with me. And so I would say that most helpful, even regardless of how close in relationship I felt with people, the most helpful was really coming with a real care and a real curiosity and an ability to listen to where I'm at without making some sort of quick assessment or judgment, or even very subtle judgment. There's ways that I could feel I would start talking and somebody would kind of get a little bit closed or contracted, or I don't know what was happening, but then there was people who would actually just bring forward a real curiosity, and it was in those moments that I just felt incredibly supported. So I think most helpful was people leaning in and with real curiosity and care. And then, the least helpful was, aside from these two women who had gone through something similar, least helpful, I would say, was people trying to give advice or, stating their philosophy, what they think about what happens after people die, like and speaking as if it's true. And I'm like, it's just, there's a way that all of that kind of wasn't very helpful, even though I know that they were, of course, working to support me. So I have I don't hold anything against them. But yeah, and then I think, even with people's grace intent, they might say something like, "Oh, you shouldn't worry about that," or "You shouldn't feel ... And I knew it was coming from a really caring space. But again, I just didn't feel I felt like what was most supportive is people giving me permission to feel exactly what I felt or have the perspectives that I was having. So I would say those two things.
Right. And what about during the early days and weeks, when the grief was really strong? Were there any practical, hands-on things that you found most helpful from people?
Yeah. Well, in one way, I would consider myself more of an introvert, and so when I go through a really challenging time, I tend to go inward more than extend outward. And I felt like what was really helpful was the people that knew me the best kind of knew that giving me, leaving me messages or texting me or all of that kind of stuff, they knew on some level how supportive that was, even if I didn't get back to them. The continual reach outs, even if I wasn't able to respond just because of the mind state I was in, were so helpful, and even having them say, you don't need to get back to me, but I just am letting you know I love you and I'm here. And so that was really supportive. And then, especially my family and my women's group and our close-in relatives, would bring us food and us, I mean me and Mark's kids, they would bring us food and they would, offer support in any way that was, that was helpful. So I would say those things. I'm sure that there was a lot more. It's just kind of digging them out. And, that mind space that we're in the very beginning is such an altered space. It's kind of hard to remember, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're just in survival mode.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And Krista, what are some specific ways that you feel like you've become a better, stronger woman as a result of Mark's passing?
Yeah, I feel like I'm, his losing Mark in his physical form is not a gift to me. I don't, but the process that I've had to go through is a huge gift to me. I feel like the reason why I feel that is because it's made me really discover who I am, and it's made me find my strength, a strength that I never even knew that I had. It's given me so many lessons about life. And, it's the realization of impermanence, the direct experience of impermanence, has altered my life completely in terms of how I relate to life now. And I feel like I actually know on a deeper level how to actually love people and love life. And I, of course, go unconscious, at times, of course, like we all do, but I really hold value in every single moment that we have. It's a precious gift to me. And we don't know what's going to happen in the next moment. We have no idea. And for me, I feel like I've become a better woman, a stronger woman, because I now actually value what a gift this life is, which I valued it before, but not in the way that this kind of loss can have one see. And so I am no longer willing to, as much as I possibly can, I'm no longer willing to fall asleep in certain areas of my life or to put things off or, now I'm more committed to telling deeper truths, to exposing who I am, even if I fear judgment, or taking the risks that I feel are necessary to take because of impermanence. So in that way, I feel like I actually, I know that I'm a totally different woman, and I know that the people that I work with are more impacted by how I show up with them more truthfully. I lean in more. I don't take anything for granted, or I try not, as best as my ability, not to take anything for granted. And if I do, I kind of back up and try and clean it up. I feel like I'm even though Mark is gone in his physical form, I have an incredible relationship with Mark, which could be heard in a strange way, but the love that we had between us has not died. In fact, I feel like it's gotten stronger, and we don't have the human challenges to bump up against anymore. He's no longer physically here. But I feel like I feel his love, and I feel his strength, and I feel my love for him, and that makes me feel like it makes me feel more excited to live. Like just having the kind of experience that I've had as a result of this, and feeling the depth of our love has me excited to be here and to be human, and to give my gifts back to anybody that I can possibly give my gifts back to. So then that's kind of a lesson to me of permanence also, which is, he's in paradox because he's gone, but he's also not gone, and boy, living in the present moment is I think has me become a better woman, like fully as much as possible living right now versus living in the past or fearing about the future. I feel like I'm doing that in such a more committed practice. So there's a lot of different layers to all of it, but I definitely feel like I'm an entirely different person.
And when you speak about connecting with Mark now, is it a feeling? Is it, do you feel like you can actually have conversations with him? How do you experience him now?
I would say this is a really interesting. I'm glad that you asked the question, because that's been an interesting process as well. Like I would say that how I experienced Mark in the days following his passing and how I experience him today also has evolved. And there's not. It's difficult to put words to for me about how I experience him, because sometimes I will hear like his voice, but is that my mind recreating his voice? I don't know, but I will hear his voice. But often the way that I connect with him is honestly when I'm in contact with my love for him, and how I then experience him is. It's like his wholeness, the wholeness of who he is present without physically seeing him. But there's it's just an extraordinary feeling of love. I feel like whether it's Mark or whether it's just being, blown wide open, I feel like I have deeper insight to situations and intuition and answers than I've ever had before. And so whether some of that's in through my connection with Mark, whether that's just being blown wide open, it's hard to know exactly. But there's instances where it's just eerily, but so tangibly, like I feel Mark, and it's just he's got a certain signature, and I could feel it, and it's cool, and I don't take it for granted, and I don't make it to be something bigger than it might be, but I definitely welcome any and every opportunity to feel his connection, and it's interesting because I'm a little bit hesitant to talk about it because then, there's some people who feel like, that being connected to Mark still means that, I'm not going to be open for connection with another man. If I go deeply into my connection with Mark, people can have that perspective. But the truth is for me and it took me, over a year for sure to even feel desire again in my body. But the truth for me now is I think that the man, whoever I end up in a relationship with next, is going to be a super lucky man because through this process, I feel like Mark has taught me how to actually love. Mm-hmm. The loss of him has taught me how to love. So I want to give voice to this kind of assumption that we can make if someone's partner has passed away or if there's still a connection there, that there's it doesn't mean that there's an opening for somebody else. I actually feel a huge opening for the right person to come along. And I'm so excited about that because that wasn't always the case. I was like, I am not interested at all, and actually my connection with, the connection I do feel with Mark feels like a big part of being open to somebody else.
Right.
Yeah.
And where are you in that process? Are you just open to it? Are you dating again? Or where are you in that spectrum?
Well, I would say that I'll just back up a little bit and say, I was actually a little bit worried about there was some people coming my way, and I was just like, it's not happening for me. Nothing is happening there in that realm in terms of desire, and so I was a little bit concerned about things coming back online. But I gave myself, and this feels really important for anybody going. Again, I know I've said this, but going through the grief process of being like, I should be different, or I should be somewhere else, or I should be different, or maybe if I just override, this and do it anyway. If I had taken up an invitation with somebody that didn't feel right, maybe that would be the thing that would get me to where I would be open again, and I'm so glad I didn't do that. Because then there was a time when, and it was about 6 months ago or so when I met somebody, and it was like, it didn't go far, but it got, there was an instant connection. And at least 6 months ago, there was an instant connection, and it was like, yay! There's desire in my body again, and there's I feel alive, and thank God I didn't push it, and so that wasn't, we didn't fall into that opening, but so I would say I'm incredibly discerning, like any woman should be, and any man should be. But I'm definitely open, and I'm not going to. I'm not willing to. I'm also really not willing to do something that I'm not a full yes to. It's just why waste my time? I'm going to be a full yes to it, at least exploring it. Otherwise, I'm not interested in wasting my time. So and part of that is the impermanence thing. Life is, we don't know what's going to happen the next day. Why do something that we're not a full yes to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in closing, what do you most want women to know who are grieving, healing their broken hearts, specifically around the loss of a loved one, but, it could just be open-ended, any kind of loss?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I would go back to this, what I have found most true, and I've done a lot of suffering with Mark's passing, in terms of it being really, really, really not just painful, but actual the feeling of suffering. And when I take suffering away from grieving, like for me, grieving and heartbreak, with the right perspective, with the right opening, with the right ability to sit with the pain and the heartbreak, I truly believe that that's an opportunity and a gift from the universe to lean in and get as close as possible to the pain and the heartbreak in your process of grieving. Because for me, I can't bring Mark back, but I am gonna take the gifts that being broken open can give a person. And I believe that coming into deep relationship with our pain and our heartbreak in these situations that we don't have any control over, we can discover more of who we are. We can discover more of our strength. We can discover divinity, and whatever that means for the person. We can discover a greater love than ever possible when we lean deeply into it. And even though that for some people, some people tend to go as far away as they can from the pain, I think it's a real gift and a real opportunity to really cultivate something extraordinary when you lean into it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for joining us and for sharing this just really intimate and vulnerable and powerful window in your life.
Yeah, you're so welcome, and I really appreciate, Sarah, the conversation and the conversations I know you're having with other women and the course that you're offering. Like, this is such a important and sacred and essential journey that we all uniquely experience in our own ways, and to have these kinds of conversations and to have the kind of gifts that you're offering are incredibly supportive. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you, and blessings on your ongoing journey.
Thank you so much, Sarah. You too.
Heartbreak is mandatory, but transformation is a choice. If you're needing more support to navigate the alchemy that's possible within your own grieving process, please come on over and explore Healing from Heartbreak. In this 4-week online immersion, I map out the 3 core seasons of heartbreak and how to weather each of them gracefully by extracting the wisdom you need from life's hardest lessons to emerge more whole, resilient, and joy-filled than ever before. Now, grief is neither an easy path, nor is it one that you need to walk alone. I've poured everything I've got into this course, from spiritual self-care to sisterhood, mentorship, Buddhist teachings, tools for emotional resilience, rituals, reprogramming core beliefs, and empowered life visioning principles and practices. So whether you're healing from a recent heartbreak or one from months or years ago, you'll receive the support that you need through our community of women, our weekly classes and mentoring, and the exact practices you need to face each stage of your healing process, so that you don't just break down, you break through. You can learn more at thewayofthehappywoman.com/healing-from-heartbreak. I'll be back again in a few days with our next interview. And until then, I'm sending you my heartfelt support. Thank you so much for being part of our sisterhood.